Welcome to those who are participating live through Facebook or watching later through YouTube or even listening through our podcast. Hopefully, you've noticed as we've come along here, Heart in Focus is all about getting your heart in focus and having an understanding of the pull of the world and the pull of the old self versus the pull of the new self and how God wants us to live and really how the joyful Christian heart wants to live as well. And so as we go through this, each evening of our 5 weeks of our course focuses on one letter of focus. And we'll see that here as we go along. So we're starting on page 69 in your student workbook. If you don't have a student workbook, be sure to let me know, Pastor Hagen, and I'll get one sent out to you free of charge. My contact info is down in the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening to the podcast, 419-262-8280 or pastorhagen@icloud.com. I'll get that sent out to you as soon as possible. So tonight, Heart in Focus, page 69. Who really owns it? There's this exercise that we kind of begin with. Let's try this exercise to realize the amount of money or the amount of resources that passes through your hands. Estimate how much money you will make between now and retirement. And so, the way to do this, just a little bit of pen, paper, back of an envelope or a calculator on your phone, or if you're driving, you can just kind of follow along. If your average wage is let's say $40,000, use some nice round numbers, $40,000 a year. And you've got 40 years to retirement. 40 times 40,000 ends up to $1.6 million. I hope. We just type that into our calculator. 40 years times $40,000, $1.6 million. And you never thought of that. And you can change the numbers. Maybe you only have 30 years left to go, and maybe your wage is a little bit more, or maybe you're just starting out and you're talking to your teenager who's 16, 17, 18. They've got maybe 50 years, and you're talking about what choices that they might want to pursue for a career or for their work, and just to think of the difference between working their retail job for the rest of their life versus progressing with a professional certificate or joining a trade union or something like that, or going on to college with a college degree, and the difference that might make over time. Once you multiply that out times 30, 40, 50 years, that kind of gives us the big picture of how much money that has been entrusted to us and that kind of through our hands. If you think back to lesson 1, the distribution center, that the resources come into us, and God is the one who entrusts us or trusts us to carry out and meet the needs that he has placed before us, to carry out the responsibilities that lie before us. So tonight we are up to the U of focus. Use his money wisely.
What do you think, Jeff? It's all mine now. I paid off the bank, got the title in the mail, just my name on it now. I own it.
We feel a pretty strong ownership over things we've worked hard for. But there is a truth we often overlook that changes our perspective on what we should do with what we have. Who really does own what we have on this earth? Watch the next video so you can catch what it means for your life.
Wake up.
What is it?
He's calling for you.
Who's calling for me?
The king. Do not delay.
Oh, it is only you. What business have you here?
The king has summoned me.
The king? What would the king want with you? Be gone.
Come quickly. His Majesty awaits.
You may enter. Leave us. Come closer. Philip, you are a trusted servant. In my absence, I want you to care for my kingdom. And that which is spoken by you will be spoken as though it came from me.
Yes, Your Majesty. God go with you, my lord.
And may he also stay with you. Counselor,
Yes, Your Majesty?
all that I have, I leave with Philip. Obey him.
And what is my command, my lord?
Enter.
The king has returned.
Philip,
Your Majesty.
the High Counselor has been sharing with me the results of your stewardship for my kingdom. Well done. Well done, my good and faithful servant. Well done. Come with me. There is still much work for us to do.
Yes, Your Majesty.
Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness.
You know, the concept of a steward or a manager of the king's things is really mind-boggling. It's not about us, and it's not about our money. It isn't our money because he owns it and he entrusts it to us to make the wise decisions in its daily use to accomplish his purposes and intentions for our lives.
And that's scary at first, but an honor when we think of it. An honor we want to live up to. He does hold us accountable. The fear fades when we realize his grace and favor toward us, and as we discover a greater understanding of his will for our lives through the things he entrusts to us.
If you're following along, your heart is in focus. The last 3 sessions, F is for fix your eyes on lasting treasure. O is for overcoming worry. C is for conquering the obstacles. And tonight, use his money wisely. At your workbook, page 69, acknowledging the real owner. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the majesty and the splendor, for everything in heaven and earth is yours. Wealth and honor come from you. So it's from King David in 1 Chronicles 29, verses 11 and 12. If you know anything about Israelite history, you might realize that King David was certainly a self-made man, you might think. He had worked hard to become the general and the leader of the Israelite people, the king who would conquer all the enemies. And for him to say, Lord, yours is the greatness, the power, the glory, the wealth, the majesty, the splendor, everything in heaven and on earth, wealth and honor come from you. And here at this point, there will be a brief video segment. If you're following along on YouTube, you'll see it there. But Siri's popping up here. So continuing, who are you? A manager or a owner or a steward? A steward, there we are. A steward kind of describes your relationship with God. A steward is a manager, someone who is entrusted with another person's wealth or property with the responsibility of managing it in the owner's best interest. There are 2 passages on your page for us to consider. First one, from Jesus in Luke chapter 12. Who is the wise and faithful manager, whom the manager puts in charge of his servants to give them their food allowance at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whom the master finds doing so when he returns. And from Hebrews 4, nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we must give account. How might these passages from Luke 12 and Hebrews 4 guide our stewardship in spending? You might think of from Luke chapter 12, the idea that we have been put in charge, and we've been put in charge with specific responsibilities. And as far as spending goes, there's all a wide variety of choices that we might make as to what we spend on and how much we spend on, and what things we pursue or don't pursue. But it's those that God has entrusted to us that are to be our primary concern. Not necessarily the needs and the wants of the manager, but rather the needs of those who depend on him. And what God is looking for there in Luke chapter 12 is faithfulness. It will be good for that servant whom the master finds doing so when he returns. In Hebrews chapter 4, nothing is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we must give account. You can think of the crooks, the white collar criminals of the last decade or two. Maybe you think of Bernie Madoff, who made off with billions of dollars. He was not a faithful manager, but he kept it hidden for a long time. Well, nothing's going to be hidden from God in real time, and everything is laid bare before His eyes. That even if everything looks like it's good from the outside, and everyone might say, hey, this person is doing a very good job of managing the responsibilities and the blessings that God has given to him or to her, God knows the truth. And that's terrifying, but it's also a comfort, because God wants to guide us to manage these blessings well, to take care of our responsibilities well. He wants us to find joy in managing these things. And so he wants us to have that faith, that confidence in him that confesses, Lord, this is who I am. This is what I've done. You know the truth of my management, and help me to glorify you. And so on our screen, using God's money wisely, your relationship with God, that he is the rightful owner. Your identity with him, that I am a manager of his resources. Your heart, one of faithfulness and responsibility, and your focus, it's not my money. I'm managing God's money. So at the bottom of your workbook, page 69, there's that little part in the box. Reality is that 100% of what I have is God's. The question to ask is, are my spending choices following the owner's wishes? And that's kind of what we're going to look at as we get into tonight's lesson. Going on to page 70. The old self opposes being God's manager. The old self says, I am the owner. This is mine. This is, I earned it. I put in the sweat and the time. I was the one slaving away. God wasn't the one doing that. That was all me. The old self opposes being God's manager. It holds out these lies. Workbook, page 70. It is my money, and I can do what I want with it. As a counterpoint, the new self echoes back, and what God says in his word echoes back from Psalm 24. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. The earth is the Lord's and everything, and all who live in the world. Ooh, nothing left out there. What about the second lie? The old self opposes being God's manager. He wants to be the owner. The old self says money and things bring happiness. And Solomon, the wisest and perhaps the richest man in the history of the world, whoever loves money never has money enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. That's probably an apocryphal story from one of the wealthy trillionaires, billionaires of the 19th century, whether it was a Rockefeller or Carnegie or somebody like that. But it was the question, well, how much money is enough? How much is enough? And the answer, just a little bit more. That's kind of what Solomon says here in Ecclesiastes 5. And then finally, the old self opposes being God's manager. The old self wants to be the owner. And the old self says self-indulgence helps me really live. have a good time, helps me relax after a long day. um, Spending is just a hobby. Going shopping is just a hobby. Cruising, cruising the internet and just scrolling and scrolling and finding the things that really bring me joy, bring me happiness. Well, it helps me live, helps me deal with things. What does God say? Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. When Jesus says here in Luke chapter 12, be on your guard against all kinds of greed, um, thinking about the different kinds of greed. There's the greed for a thing, an item. There's the greed for um, more than what we already have. The greed that says, well, my car is getting a little beat up, and maybe a different one, maybe a nicer one would be a little bit better. There's the greed for something that belongs to somebody else. That's the greed that we call jealousy. There's the greed of all the promises that wealth or indulgence hold out for us, that only if I have this or only if I made that, then finally people would recognize me, or they would hold me in high regard. People would look at me, and they would recognize me for the skills and talents that I have, or the accomplishments that I have made. There's that greed for reputation. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. The old self opposes being God's manager. He wants to be the owner and take the credit, because that's really the bottom line now, isn't it? Kind of gets to the question of needs and wants. And there's a little bit of a discussion here at the bottom of page 70. A little bit of a discussion here at the bottom of page 70, especially if you're following along in a workbook on your own or with a friend, confidant, loved one. Just go ahead and we'll read through these just ever so briefly. Sorry, wrong one. First, our perception of needs and wants has changed over the years. List 5 items that people consider needs today that either didn't exist many years ago or were considered luxuries. And I'll give you a minute. You can jot some down there. You can hit pause. What are 5 items that people consider needs today that either didn't exist many years ago or were considered luxuries many years ago? Maybe you think of talking to kids or teenagers and saying, well, I remember when Netflix used to mail DVDs to your house. And they'd look at you like, are you crazy? Needs and wants. You can think of the little computers that we carry in our pockets. If you're watching on YouTube, they had a funny picture of a flip phone from like 2008 on the screen. Kind of funny how things change. And we've got these phones in our pockets, and they can do pretty much everything, almost everything that we would want or anything that we would need. But it doesn't have to be the newest and the best, because Verizon or T-Mobile says, hey, we'll give you one for free, and then you can pay it off over the next 2.5 years on contract. And then by the time you get to the end of that 2.5 year period, there's a brand new phone out that would fit. And it's only, $12.99 or $27.49 a month. And this old phone is starting to look a little rough and not as fast and speedy as you might want. Needs of today that either didn't exist many years ago or were considered luxuries. Indoor plumbing, how far back do you want to go? There are quite a few, and many of them perhaps in the technology camp. Few other things maybe in the regular lifestyle, day-to-day things. Could probably think of a few more on your own there. What about the next one? It's important to distinguish between needs and wants. Describe how you can tell the difference between the two. Can give you a minute for that. You can hit pause if you need more time. How do you tell the difference between a need and a want? I think one of the major benefits, major blessings of considering this question really brings into focus a little bit better the question of stewardship of time. Like, do you need a phone? Well, you need some way to communicate with the world. You don't need the newest and the greatest, but you do need something that functions And maybe you don't need it because you can still drive to the bank and deposit your check there. You can still call somebody on a flip phone. But there is that stewardship of time aspect as well that says, well, even though I can get by, I can survive in this life without a touch screen smartphone. I can just have a regular flip phone. At the same time, this device with a touch screen smartphone, Android or an iPhone, it can really save me a good deal of time. So I can deposit my check by taking a picture of it rather than the 20 minutes over to the bank and back. It can help me to manage my finances. And so, but that difference between need and want is kind of the fine line we're trying to define. That need is something that is essential for everyday life. And then it kind of gets into that little gray area where maybe it's not an absolute need that you have to have an iPhone, but that stewardship of time says, well, it would be preferable to have an iPhone, but I don't, even though might want an iPhone X or 12 or 13 or 22, whatever they're on right now, I don't need that because what I have is serviceable. Needs and wants. Your need might be transportation to get to work, but your want, that Corvette or the souped out truck, might not be the basic transportation that you need to get to work. There's also a little bit on page 124 in your book, and you can complete this on your own. This will be part of the homework, I suppose. Page 124, talking about the categories, needs and wants. Housing, basic protection from the weather, rain, cold, and wind. Expanded description of wants, maybe a dream home, large lot, prestigious neighborhood, or your definition of wants. And so the different categories, thinking about different categories might be helpful in distinguishing needs and wants between housing, furnishings, transportation, groceries, clothing, gifts, education, dining out, personal technology, vacation. And all of these things can be accomplished very, very modestly. And I think that's one of the words that's on the page there. And they can fulfill the need. But they also progress also to say, well, where do I want to allocate my want? Where do the wants fall in that? So it's at least good to have that in mind, because the pull of the old self says, I deserve this, I want this, I am the owner, not a manager. So we'll continue on page 71 in your workbook. A little bit more thinking about this topic between the pull of the old self and the pull of the new self. It's really the attitude that's important. The Apostle Paul penned some wise words that helps us to understand how to distinguish between needs and wants. Summarize the attitudes he carefully describes for us. 1 Timothy 6. But godliness with contentment is great gain, for he brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. And from 1 Timothy 6, verse 17, command those who are rich in the present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. Needs and wants. How would you describe the attitude that he carefully describes for us? I think in that first verse, thinking the attitude of contentment, recognizing that I'm not the owner, I'm simply the manager for my time in this world. And then the second one is that our hope is in God, that I can be content with what I have because God is the one who provides, and this God, our God, will continue to provide for us. And this is the time, during the time of our lives, that we have the ability to live for God, to be rich in good deeds. So that pull of the old self says, I deserve it because I own it. The pull of the new self says, it's not about me because I'm a manager, not the owner. So being a steward or a manager for God is living for him. And this is kind of the image that you have on your screen. The income spending, first of all, goes to basic care. This is the pull of the old self. Spending going for basic care and maybe covering debt and no savings or givings. The pull of the new self begins with giving, begins with having our heart and focus about whose money this really is, and then giving a portion, returning a portion to God. And then that basic care is taking care of our needs, not necessarily fulfilling all our wants, but maybe planning for them or thinking about them for the future. And that gets into the savings for emergency, savings for debt or paying down some debt, um, maybe saving for a future purchase or saving for the long term. And then after that, after those things are taken care of, the pull of the new self, this is the wise approach of the wise manager, the wise steward, finally concludes with spending. The spending comes after the saving. The spending says, well, this is the leftover after I have fulfilled all my responsibilities using the money that God has given to me. Kind of gets us into page 71 at the bottom, that part where we talk about making wise choices. Ephesians 5:15 through 17. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish. And biblically speaking, foolish means somebody who is clueless about what God has said in his word, or somebody who arrogantly pushes back against what God has said in his word. Because the fool, biblically, is an unbeliever. And that unbeliever may be one of ignorance, or it may be one of arrogance. But either way, it is one of opposition to what God has said in his word. And he says, do not be foolish, because these days are evil. So, on the following pages, identify ways you can make the most of what God has given to you to manage for Him as His steward. This gets onto page 72 in your workbook. Talk first about housing choices. This is a category in your spending plan. Owning your home provides a good forced savings plan, so to speak, tax-free growth in many circumstances, maybe some long-term stability with a fixed rate loan. Um, and, and it might be preferable in some cases to rent, in other cases to own. Historically, kind of the break-even point is about 5 years. That if you're going to be living in a place for about 5 years or more, you can expect to recoup the expenditures of buying the house and the cash outlay of buying the house in the first place. If you're going to be expecting to live in a place for less than 5 years, you probably wouldn't recover that. But in some cases you might, depending on the housing market. And real estate is always always kind of a location, and things might happen locally or things might happen globally or nationally that could have an impact on the local real estate market. Consider renting if prices and interest rates are not favorable for buyers, or maybe property taxes and improvements and upkeep are too expensive or too time consuming. Maybe relocation is going to occur soon. That's about that 5-year break even. That debt is always a burden to your finances, even if there is no other debt. If you're paying that mortgage, from that Latin word meaning death, that you signed your life away on the basis of this loan for this house, and that is going to be a burden, and that is something that you'll need to consider. Or you might need a little bit more time to strengthen your own personal financial situation. Some other considerations. These are prudent, I believe. Beware of drawing on 2 salaries for mortgage payments. This is always the thinking that that is in this book and many other books on the topic, that you do your best to live within the means of one income, and then save the other income where possible, or at least cover the mortgage itself entirely on one income, so that if something were to happen, a job loss or disability or something like that, that you'd still be able to retain the house even with the savings and the earnings from one income. Negotiating interest rates. Right now, interest rates for a 15 and a 30-year loan are above 2%, which are historically some of the lowest interest rates in the history of this nation. 2.5% is if you have a really good credit score. Otherwise, you'd be up in the upper twos or low threes, perhaps. Utilities, talking about telecommunication needs and options. Like in our household, we've got the internet and we've got cell phones. We don't pay for a landline because we don't. It's not 1990. Evaluate your use of cable, like cable television. And somebody might say, well, I'm not going to pay for cable, but then I'm going to subscribe to 3, 4, 5 different subscription services like Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus and Amazon Prime. And all of a sudden you're paying roughly the same amount of $60, $70, $80 a month for television. And energy efficiency. There might be a utilities rebate in your utility bill for this, or a tax rebate on your personal taxes. But there will be savings if you're able to upgrade, do some more insulation in the house, or change your faucets or your lighting to a more efficient light source, or more efficient faucet. That's going to pay dividends in the long run. And there might be some other choices that could save money. They're talking about landscaping, maybe even down to the color of the shingles in some cases, or whether a house is facing one way or another, or the window choices or window treatments. If you've got blinds or shutters that you close on a hot day or could open on a cold winter day, something like that. There might be a few other household saving choices. Feel free to add yours in the comments below. Continuing on page 73, this is part of the spending plan activity. And our spending plan was all the way at the beginning of your workbook. Going back and forth a little bit here. But the spending plan is on page 12 in your workbook. And you can work through some of the numbers on your own before you kind of jot them into this spending plan. And maybe you've got a house already and you're paying some of these, or maybe your rent includes a lot of these, and then you just jot down all the rest of the details. Or maybe you're looking ahead to that day when you'd be able to perhaps purchase a home or something like that, and you could work backward from the total monthly cost and do a little bit of figuring that way. That would come into play a little bit more if you talk with your realtor, if you're looking for a house, to sit down and figure out what is it that we could actually afford. Excuse me. And the housing choices, I'm looking to keep this to, cap it at about 1/3 of your total income. So on page 73, after you've worked through those housing choices from page 12, then look at it. Number 1 on page 73, look at the amounts you currently spend in these categories. And if you haven't done so, then go back to that pre-work and take care of it. And then begin to think of possible changes. Can expenses be reduced? Are all there alternative options or substitutions available? There might be some resources in the front and in the appendix, such as the percent guides and the spending plan, that if your percentage is getting up into the 35, 40, 45, even 50%, then that might be a little bit of a worry, a little bit of concerning, something worth looking at. Maybe there are other creative ideas, and you could think of, what is one plan that we could plan to implement, put into place. One option there might be to, if you own, to talk with your insurance agent, every year or every other year, to say, is this what we really need, or is there anything that the insurance company would give us a discount if we did, to bring down that cost to the insurance. And and really, actuaries and insurance agents are some of the best mathematicians in the world. So if they say that they would give you a discount of $20 a month if you change your locks or change your shutters or whatever it is, then there's probably a sound mathematical insurance bound reason for that. But sometimes they have ideas too. Or your household utility company. Here in Ohio, you can compare apples to apples. I think it's applesToapples.org or Apples to Apples Ohio, something like that, where you can compare among the natural gas and electric companies, and they will basically bid for your service. Transportation choices, bottom of page 73. Outside of our housing choice, transportation can be the next largest current spending item. However, the course of the lifetime, people can end up spending more for their transportation than for housing. Not always, you don't have to necessarily, but it's kind of an ongoing thing. Transportation quiz, true or false? What do you think? Modern technology has made used cars more reliable and durable than ever before. True or false? Second, most Americans trade in cars because they want to rather than they need to. True or false? Third, for most people, it is best to save and pay cash for a car. Fourth, true or false? The least expensive car to purchase is the one you presently own. And fifth, there are no economic advantages to leasing a car. So running through that, number one, modern technology has made used cars more reliable. True. Most Americans trade in cars because they want to rather than need to. True. For most people, it's best to save and pay cash for a car. Also true. The least expensive car to purchase, the one you presently own. True. And there are no economic advantages to leasing a car. True. Eek, scary. So vehicles, transportation choices. You're thinking about new versus used, and some of the major considerations: reliability and repairs and depreciation. That number one, reliability is really the bottom line, not the initial quality, but the reliability over time. Like next time you're driving around, just take a look around, and in some communities you might have to take a look around for a few months before you really notice and get a view over time. But take a look around to see how many like 10-year-old, 15-year-old vehicles are on the road, and what type of car they are, what make or model of car that they happen to be. And personally at our household, we've got a Toyota Sienna, and driving around I see a lot of Toyota Siennas that are in our model year, and it's not a new model year. They're I think for 2021 they're coming out with the second redesign since our model year. But it appears to be a very reliable vehicle. Reliability can really help to bring down the overall cost of ownership. Secondly, repairs. Decide when continuous repairs become too costly. And this might be helpful if you have a friend, a neighbor, a relative, a fellow congregation member. I could think of a few around here in the Toledo, Ohio area that I would greatly and highly recommend if you are in need of car repair. But there comes a point when the car becomes more expensive to repair than to get rid of, so to speak. But one of the things that kind of comes into play is something that my dad had talked about when I was younger, and something had gone wrong with one of our vehicles. And it's like, wow, that's kind of here's a sizable fix, $600 or $800, maybe is $1,200. And he said, well, yeah, but a car payment is, $150, $175 to $200. And so if this repair, let's say it's, $1,200 repair, and if this repair helps us get 6 months and a day out of our car, then we come out ahead. Because $1,200 repair versus a $200 car payment, you're going to be spending $1,200 over the course of the next 6 months on a vehicle. And he said, if we get into 7 months, 8 months with that vehicle, then we're in the black on that purchase or on that repair. And finally, the depreciation curve of a newer car. That some cars, if it's a brand new car, then you're really gonna lose your money right away. And the most depreciation happens within the first 5 to 8 years, so that by the time you're buying an 8, 9, 10-year-old vehicle, if it's in good repair, then that vehicle has already gone through the bulk of its depreciation, and its value is going to be what the value is. Page 74, inside the box. A slightly used car is more cost effective than new, In fact, the best deal on a car may be the one you already have, if you can accept some of its flaws and keep up with reasonable maintenance and repair costs. What we want to avoid, especially on cars, is being upside down on a car loan, owing more on a car than what it's worth. And these are the car and the cell phone are two of the statistically two of the major drivers for American debt, so to speak. The continual car payment is a real anchor on trying to get out of debt and trying to avoid debt. And the continual new phone is to a lesser degree simply because the cost is less. But that idea of being upside down on a car loan, you drive into a car sales lot and they'll try to sell you on the idea of negative equity, and we'll just roll all your negative equity into a new car loan. What they mean on negative equity is that you still owe a certain amount of money more than your car is actually worth. And so I think if you follow Clark Howard, he's one of the two, major financial gurus that is on TV and radio and the internet and everything. His recommendation is to not take out a car loan for more than 42 months. For 3.5 years is the maximum car loan. And if you can't afford that payment, then you need to readjust your priorities or maybe save a little bit more or look at a different vehicle. Because once you get out past that about 42 months, then no matter what vehicle it is, unless it's a classic collector's car, once you get it past out those 42 months, you're going to be upside down on it no matter what. The plan to pay cash for the next automobile isn't spending $350 payments per month, then the car is paid off, but you keep putting that $350 per month into an account, what we would call a sinking fund that you are filling up. It's like a sinkhole that you're filling up and putting the cash there, $350 per month. After 2 years, you would be able to pay cash for an $8,400 vehicle, or 3 years, a $12,000 vehicle. In the current market, like an 8 or 10, I think that if you're looking for a larger vehicle, an 8 or 10-year-old vehicle is right around $8,000 to $10,000. That would be like, something with 6, 7, 8 seats, like a minivan or a larger SUV. If you're looking for a smaller vehicle, you would, like a 4 regular sedan, that might be within, $5,000 to $8,000, depending on options. And then you'd be free from a car payment. And then you'd use the interest on the savings plus the trade-in value to pay cash for your next car, assuming that you keep your car in good repair and you keep it clean. Then you would be able to trade it in or sell it privately, and maybe not for the full amount of the new car, but you would be able to, after selling that car privately, you'd be able to put some of that cash either toward the car you just purchased or repairs, or even planning for any other emergency expenditures. So the real savings, this is the box at the bottom of 74. The real savings of owning a used car comes from all the years of potential service it provides after it's paid off, up until the wheels fall off. And there might be some other choices in this category that could save money. Maybe you just forego a car entirely. There are some places where you can live where that is a possibility, and you skip by with Uber or Lyft or something like that. Uber, Uber, and then you could avoid it entirely, and maybe you're able to walk to a nearby store or bicycle, or it's just you live in a larger city like that where you don't need a car, or you could avoid it entirely. That's a possibility too. All right, insurance. Oh boy. Insurance choices, page 75. Another spending plan category. Insurance is an important financial tool to transfer the risk of big losses that could have a large financial impact on you or your family. So the good rule to follow: to buy insurance against the things you can't afford to lose. So if you, however you want to put it, you're transferring the risk. If it's too big of a risk for you to, take the loss of a home, and you wouldn't be able to cash flow, $100,000 surgery, that's why you have health insurance, or that's why you have home insurance or car insurance. Health insurance. used to cover medical bills, especially catastrophic costs, and premium costs can be reduced. Maybe health insurance is through your work, and health insurance in the health insurance market over the last, 8 to 10 years has been in flux since Obamacare, and then some of the amendments to that, and challenges to that, and then whatever else may be coming down the pike afterward. Um, but the other really important one, disability insurance. This was this is one that is often overlooked, and it might be included in if you have a job with a benefits package. Looking at the disability insurance, and especially the terms and what does that include, and when does it kick in, when does it start, would be something very worthwhile because. And this is, we'll compare it with life insurance here in a minute. Health insurance helps you to get better. It covers the cost of getting better. Disability insurance covers the loss of income, or a partial loss of part of the loss of income until you are able to get better, or or if you are not able to return to your previous occupation as well. um, and it is important to understand the differences between regular and occupational policies. And you might reduce the premiums by increasing the waiting period. The difference between disability insurance that kicks in after 30 days versus disability insurance that kicks in after 90 days or 6 months. Um, the odds of you having a disability that lasts longer than 6 months are fairly low, but if that were to happen, that would be a major burden, and that would be very difficult. Because if we roll into the next one talking about life insurance, and we'll compare it briefly with disability insurance. If I have life insurance, and if I have to pass away, Jesus takes me to heaven, then my wife and children are still here, and the life insurance will cover their needs for a period of time, so that they don't have to make any quick decisions, and they're able to get their life in order, after, during their grief. um, and maybe my wife would go back to school, or who knows, find a job or something like that to support the family with some sort of a plan there. But compared with disability insurance, that would be a different thing entirely than if I became disabled and I needed constant care, 24 hours of regular care around the clock with somebody watching for me. That would be a major difference, because if I just passed away, then they'd get their life together, move in with some family for a while, and move on. Um, but if I was still alive and in need of constant attention and care, um, then that would change their financial picture. And maybe that sounds a little crass to put it that way, but it is helpful to think through that we value the life of every single person. And and we can't control what happens to us, but we do want to do the best we can by being wise stewards with what God has given to us. So we talk about life insurance, an important tool to cover the financial impact of death. Um, for most people, term life insurance is a better deal. Cash value insurance is basically what most of if you walk into insurance office, that's what they would try to sell you on, sell to you. Term insurance is fairly simple, where you just say, I want $500,000 or $750,000 for the next 30 years, or the next 35 or 40 years. And if I happen to pass away during that period of time, then the insurance company writes a check to my beneficiaries or survivors, and then they move on. Cash value, you're kind of continually paying in, and they kind of invest it, and they kind of give you a little bit of a return on it, but you would end up spending a lot more for the value that you would get out of it. Um, so it's on in your workbook there. Term typically less expensive, covering a designated term, but cash value is typically more expensive and builds certain levels of equity. Um, and the guideline here, 5 to 10 times of your annual salary, so that if you were to pass away, then those who your children, your spouse, if you have a spouse or children in the picture, then they would have some time to make decisions without getting rushed into anything. Now, if you've just gotten married and you're newly married and it's just the two of you, this isn't the highest priority, because if one spouse passed away, then the other would just go back to um, carry on with their life and their choices, and they would grieve. But if there were children in the picture, this is much more important, because you need to think about, how do we provide for these children, um, especially during a time of grief. And basically what you're looking for here, this is kind of what our well plan giving counselors talk about too. What you're looking for is to provide a little bit of a cushion for a period of years, so that nothing has to be rushed into. 5 to 10 times your annual salary, maybe 10, 12 times, depending on certain circumstances and numbers. Auto insurance. Shop around and compare. Consider using the highest deductible and use the emergency fund as backup. Or maybe you can combine policies and save, with same companies, your homeowners insurance and an umbrella insurance policy or something like that. Going on to page 76. Homeowners insurance. Be sure to check that it is the replacement cost if you own your home. That's a term that says that they will replace the value of the home, not that they would give you a check for the value of the initial insurance or something like that. If you don't own your dwelling, you can get a fairly cheap renter's insurance policy. When we lived in a parsonage, this is what we had, and it was just like a $30,000, $40,000 policy, maybe 50. And the encouragement there is, it's fairly inexpensive, but the cost of replacing all the furniture and all the books and basically your life as you had it, in the event of a fire or a flood, that is something we would typically underestimate when we did a walkthrough of our house. And you would say, well, yeah, that $30,000 of stuff here, no way. But if you had to buy something new to replace, then that would be maybe used up fairly quickly. An umbrella liability policy. This would cover, usually attached to your homeowner's insurance, and this would cover, if somebody slipped and fell on the sidewalk because ice formed on the sidewalk after you shoveled it. Then that umbrella policy would probably kick in to help to shield you or your assets from liability. So this is your spending plan activity. And this is, reflect the pre-work is that part on page 12. The spending plan activity is all the way in the back of your work, page 129. And we talked about other optional insurance choices. It might be dental insurance. If you run the math on that and you talk to your dentist, maybe they provide their own, kind of cash plan, or maybe if you bundle all of your visits for 1 year, then you might come out ahead with dental insurance. Long-term healthcare insurance. This is typically when somebody hits about age 65 or 66, that this would pay for the nursing home stay, or a long-term stay in a senior living facility, because that can get very expensive very quickly. It would not be uncommon for the monthly cost of a nursing home stay to be nearly twice the amount of a monthly mortgage, twice or more, depending on your local area and where you end up. And as pastorally, I visit a lot of nursing homes, because we have a number of people who live in different nursing homes and senior living facilities. And by and large, the middle majority, the middle 50, 60% is very good, or, at least livable. The ones that are less appealing, there are probably 20% that you walk in, you're like, oh. And then there are probably some, the 20% you walk in and it's fresh and it's clean and it smells nice and it looks nice and it's well kept. And you're like, wow, this is a really nice place to live. And the people living in the least expensive option, that sometimes you walk in, or maybe, some of the government provided housing that I think back, and some people that I visited back in Canada, Some of those places, you just walk in and you get the idea that it's dingy and dusty and dark and a little dirty, perhaps, and maybe that smell just kind of hits you like a little bit more than it should have. Um, and those people can still have a wonderful life there, but if you're able to have some long-term disability or long-term healthcare, um, long-term care insurance, if you need it, if you're in that social security age bracket, basically, um, that would definitely be something to look into and something worth considering, because Medicare will pay, or as far as I know, Medicare will pay for a nursing home stay, but that will only kick in after all the other assets have been used up and sold off, and Medicare will pay for one bed in a two-person room. That was my experience in Minnesota. List of insurances to avoid: credit life or credit disability, credit protection, cancer, hospital indemnity, accidental death or dismemberment. If you die accidentally, you're still just as dead. Prepaid burial costs. What the funeral home would do there is you prepay, and maybe it's 10, 15, 20 years before you pass away, and you prepaid that $10,000, and then they just invested that, and they reaped the interest for those 10 or 15 or 20 years, and it helped to provide some stability to their nursing home, or their funeral home, that is. But the preferable option would be that you set that money aside and put it in a conservative investment, so that you do get 2%, 5%, maybe 8% in a good year, return on that, and then you get, or your beneficiaries get, to use that money rather than the funeral home profiting from it. Mortgage life insurance. This is one, after we purchased our home, and this has probably been your experience too, if you were to purchase a home, that you will get inundated, literally flooded with offers for mortgage insurance. And I actually gave one guy, probably 15, 20 minutes. We sat and talked for a little bit, and he ran a few numbers and said what it would cost to cover our mortgage. And I said, well, but James, or whatever his name happened to be, I could go get a term life insurance for double that amount and still pay less than you're telling me I should pay for my mortgage insurance. Why don't I just do that? And he said, yeah, that's probably what I would do in your shoes too. I'm like, all right, have a nice day. Um, so there are some insurances to avoid, because insurance is it's to cover the loss of things that we can't afford to lose, but it's not to cover every and any potential loss, because it would be very easy to get into the weeds of covering all sorts of everything for every sort of insurance. And yeah, anyway. So bottom of page 76, look at the amounts you currently spend in this insurance category. And you can pull some of this data from your pre-work at page 12 and begin to think of possible changes in this category. Can expenses be reduced? Are other alternative options or substitutions available? Could use the percent guide, ideas shared by others, or other creative ideas. Two things that I would definitely recommend would be, or one thing really, would be to shop around for insurance. And go to like a State Farm or American Family. I think State Farm is the largest insurer in the nation, for a variety of insurance, health, or not health, but like life insurance, home insurance, car insurance, and see what their best quote would be for insuring what you need, putting it all together, bundling it all together, and they might give you a discount. And then go to another insurance broker, an independent insurance broker. Like an independent insurance broker that has an office just off of Detroit and Anthony Wayne Trail, and they're an independent insurance office, which means that they work with 15 to 20 different insurance companies, and they put together a package based on what your needs are. And they pull from the best options from all those 15 or 20 insurance companies. And if you compare one of the big insurers like American Family or State Farm, and their best bundle offer, compared with an independent insurance broker, that would probably, and you do that, every couple of years. The first time you do it, it might take a couple hours, 2 3 hours of sitting there listening to a sales pitch, and just watching for how the insurance agent plays on fear, uncertainty, and doubt to try to sell you on all the insurance that you need. But then you got to come back and say, well, here's what I actually need. I just want to cover the loss of something that I can't afford to lose. If you have any questions, contact me, Pastor Hagen, and I can put you in touch with a couple of people that I would trust in this matter. And you can adjust the figures on your spending plan. You could also use policygenius.com, and there are a couple of other online insurance brokers that would be worth looking into. If you go to, I think it's nerdwallet.com, that might be another option, or check out clarkhoward.com, and they would probably have some recommendation for where to look for an online insurance broker. I don't have any other ideas offhand other than Policy Genius. I know I've worked with them for a new life insurance policy after the mortgage insurance guys showed himself the way to the door. Page 77. Finding more money to save. Talking about spending leaks. The boat here, a slow leak over time would sink a boat just as surely as hitting an iceberg. So to determine the leaks in your routine spending, a couple of simple habits that you do each day: coffee, lunch, treats, cigarettes, if that's your thing. Maybe it's the 2 o'clock in the afternoon soda from the vending machine, and something you do every day times 200 days equals how much it is per year as an expense made during the work week. Or a couple of non-essential items in your life that are monthly, talking about wants, such as magazine subscriptions, if those things still exist, technology related, cable TV, personal care, maybe total up all the different streaming services and Amazon Prime, Hulu, Netflix, Disney Plus, ESPN, and NBC, or whatever it is. Total all that up times 60 months over a 5-year period. And these little costs add up over time. And there's a chart there on your page page 77, that you can look at on your own. And even if some of the initial costs are a little bit out of sync with current costs, that still even more serves to illustrate what they're saying here. And maybe you notice this for a little bit for yourself during the year 2020, when all of a sudden some of those daily things or weekly or monthly things just didn't happen, because there was a period of time where we had to work from home, or you had your own home office, or you weren't commuting or something like that. And then all of a sudden you looked at your household budget and you're like, wow, where did this come from? What's going on here? Oh, because I'm not driving, and I'm not getting the coffee, and I'm not getting the afternoon soda or the donut or whatever it is. And it just kind of adds up over time. And talking about challenging your attitudes. Am I spending on myself or managing God's resources? That's the pull. The pull of the old self says, I'm the owner. The pull of the new self says, I'm the manager. Do my purchases reflect the difference between needs and wants? A need, well, you need water to live. A want, I need that. I want, notice the terminology that we use. I need that ice cold Mountain Dew, or that ice cold water from the vending machine. No, that's what you want. You don't need it. What you need is a good drink of water, and you do have a reusable water bottle at home. Almost like, like we always talk to our children. But it makes sense, right? Are my credit cards making me spend more than I should? It might be beneficial to say, I'm only going to spend, here's $20 or $25 in my wallet this week, rather than a swipe of the card or a touch of the card, or something like that, because the more personal contact that we have with our purchases, such as using physical money versus the touch of a card or paying with your phone, the less people tend to spend. Have I given God honor with my tithe and my offerings? If we do a little bit of total about this over the course of a day or week or month or year, and all those leaky everyday purchases compared with realistically, and this is a little dose of the law perhaps, compared with our regular offering to our Lord. And you just kind of say, well, does this reflect honor to my God for all that He has given to me as a freely given response of love to His love for me? Or am I acting like I'm the owner rather than the manager? And then finally, am I focused on the future or an instant pleasure? That instant, yeah, donuts, man. That's a pretty instant rush. Um, but focusing for the future, well, that donut might not be good for my cholesterol. I don't know about you. Um, or it might not be in line with your personal or household spending plan. Bottom of the page, the problem is not how much we earn, but how much we spend. And we can't think to ourselves that this will all be solved if I had a raise or if I had a different job. Because if we don't manage where we are now, then the addition of a greater salary, larger salary, just means bigger problems later. Going on to page 78, and this kind of goes on for a little bit here. Over the next few pages, actually takes us through about page 86 when we talk about ways to kind of comb through this, finding more money. The following pages 80 through 87 contain additional ideas for saving more money. Identify specific ways you could save money in those categories, then share with the entire group the best and most creative ideas. And this would be a place where, if you're watching on YouTube, hopefully you have that workbook. If you don't have a workbook, contact me, Pastor Hagen at iCloud.com, PastorHagen at iCloud.com, and I'll send you one. But look through the next few pages and give it some thought. I think the only one that I'm really gonna comment on is groceries on page 80. That typically speaking, page 80. That typically speaking, if you shop your way around the edges of the store, that will result in healthier food and get away from the middle aisles where all the processed food is. And that's better for your health, but it's also those middle aisles with all the processed food and the prepackaged food are what they call a value added item. So they could take this potato that they would normally sell for, let's say 39 cents, and they could chop up this potato and deep fry it and then put it in a bag and sell it as a bag of potato chips for $1.39 instead of only 39 cents. Or maybe they take two of those potatoes for 78 cents and they mix it with a little bit of egg and mayonnaise back in the deli, and then all of a sudden it's a potato salad that they sell for $8.99 a pound back at the deli. And that little package of potato salad that you got on your lunch break was $4.39, a profit of an extra $4 over the 39 cents or 78 cents of potato that's actually in there. So that concept of a value added food, and that could turn into a fun little hobby. If I could recommend a couple of cookbooks that I've actually enjoyed and learned from, but a little bit of a hobby of cooking with real food rather than having a factory somewhere else cook for you. Because statistically, or according to the most recent research, and I think Michael Pollan has written about this, Pollan, that the biggest indicator of health, when we talk about health, not even talking about finances here, the biggest indicator of health is who made the food. Was it a Kraft or Hormel 100 or 400 miles away, or was it you in your own kitchen, cracking eggs and chopping potatoes? Who made the food? As you can tell, that is a topic near and dear to my heart. Just a little bit down into the right, I think, of my heart in that place called the stomach. But there are a number of spending choices to look through, to consider over the next few pages, all the way through through page 87. and that is worth your time to comb through on your own or with a loved one, or I could send you a couple workbooks and the whole family could look at this together and make it a game, make it fun, make it a challenge. Out of our, start with your household budget and your household numbers, if especially if you've got teenagers at home or young people at home, preteens even, and say, here's the number, and let's make it a game of looking through these pages. How can we trim that number the most? And it'll give them an opportunity to be involved in the finances and to talk about it and to think about their choices, and an opportunity for the parents to talk about needs and wants. So I'll commit that to your hands. That's all the way through page 87. What I want you to turn to now is page 88. And you'll probably have to hit pause somewhere in there, but to work through pages 80 to 87 on your own. But after you've done that, page 88, take a little bit of time to complete that spending plan activity page in the appendix, page 129. Food choices, try to limit that to maybe 20%, 10 to 20% of your household income, and that might shift a little bit depending on how many children and the ages of the children. And it might take a little bit of creativity in some cases, but if you start with learning how to cook on your own and avoiding some of those value added items that are so easy and simple, then you're off to a good start. And household personal choices, 5 to 10%. Talking about household items, clothing, taking care of your hair, or books, magazine, gifts, and miscellaneous. So page 88, number 1, look at the amounts you currently spend in these categories. And that was the pre-work from page 12. So then number 2, begin to think of possible changes in these categories. Can the expenses be reduced? Are other alternatives, options, or substitutions available? You can use the percent guides that we have here, maybe ideas from others, or maybe other creative ideas that you run across when you go to clarkhoward.com, because I've mentioned his name like 5 times in this lesson, or other creative ideas. But looking for at least one idea that you want to implement, you plan to implement, or maybe you need to implement, and then adjust that figure on your spending plan. Page 129. Now we've got the bonus, negotiating. Negotiating in the free market system. This is page 89 in your workbook. So often we may feel the price marked is the price we have to pay, but we live in a free market society in which buyers determine the selling price. No one can force us to pay for something that we do not want. The final buying decision with any purchase is ours. Therefore, it is vitally important to understand that the price a seller places on a good or service may be negotiated. Always remember that the market is trying to sell things to consumers, and we should learn how to negotiate most everything and then have the confidence to do so. It sometimes is profitable to haggle over the asking price in order to spend less. And this might work better when you're purchasing something off of like Facebook Marketplace, but it's still possible, especially when you're talking about larger purchases like a house or a car, or maybe just other purchases. And in the box, more than 90% of shoppers who haggle get a better deal on furniture, electronics, appliances, and medical bills. That's going back to 2007. Some basic guidelines for negotiating. Don't be afraid to ask for a deal. Is there any way you could, help with price on this, or exhibit your Christian faith? Honest and patience and kindness. Don't be, don't be a jerk, and don't get. Yeah, I think that term would be a Karen. That's kind of one of those modern terms. Just a second. Yeah, don't be a jerk, and you want to demonstrate that, yes, I'm a Christian, but I want to manage things well. It might be advantageous, number 3, to pay with cash. Like if you're buying a used car from some private seller and he's got it marked at $8,000 and you've been saving up for a while, and you walk over there and you put a couple stacks of hundreds on the hood of the car, and you'd say, well, would you take $7,200 right now, and lay it out right there. That might work for you. I know it has for for more than one person. Number four, have a backup plan and be prepared to walk, because the buyer has the advantage because they have the ability to walk away. You don't need to purchase it, right? The first one to speak loses, especially the first one to name a price, loses. Uh, Number six, don't become emotionally attached to a product or service. This is kind of the horror stories of house buying. If and you read about it online like all the time, when somebody is walking through a house and one person says, yeah, there's some issues here, and I could probably buy it, but it's not exactly what I'm looking for. And then somebody else from that same household, a spouse or a child, walks through and is just gushing about how they love everything. um, that sort of attitude, that emotional attachment, gives leverage to the seller. Number seven, consider bartering services in exchange for a product or another service. If you're self-employed and that's your business, then that there might be tax implications on that. Or if you just donate your time and mow somebody's lawn or whatever it may be, what is it that you are able to do? Uh, Number eight, learn how to ask for a better deal, such as, will you accept a lower price for this? Do you have any other incentives that would convince me to purchase this? I'm willing to give up fill in the blank. If I purchase this, will they accept this offer? Price is not good enough. You'll have to do better. Just being direct. When is this item going on sale? And then you just sit and wait. Can I have that price now? Will you go and ask your manager for a better price? I'm going to pay the asking price, but would you be able to deliver it for me? And I want free installation. See, the item has a flaw, such as a scratch or a missing button. Would you consider taking 10, 20, 30% off the price? And there are some places, some stores that follow seasonal deals or just have a better price overall, better structure overall, or a better quality product. Next one, finding money to save. Talking about, watching out for gambling, lottery, and games of chance. This is a warning. Gambling has grown rapidly in popularity and acceptability. In the most recent 2020 presidential election, that was the most the most highly betted upon election in any U.S. history. People betting on the outcome of voting. Lottery tickets can be purchased in grocery stores, gas stations. Casinos have sprung up in all areas of the country. The internet makes all sorts of gambling available from home. Off-track betting is prevalent in many areas. Some may view it as a form of entertainment. Others may call it a social outlet. But most hope it is their chance to get their hands on some wealth, causing many to risk everything to the forces of chance. What is often overlooked is the negative impact. Gambling has destroyed the financial and spiritual lives of many people. It touches people's moral and religious being. Gambling easily exposes the old self to the sins of greed and feeds the covetousness addressed by Scripture, such as 1 Timothy 6. People who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge men into ruin and destruction. And among you, there must not even be a hint of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. And so the place, if it is part of the final line of the budget after you've returned a portion of God's money back to Him, after you've taken care of your basic needs, you've done your saving, including having paid off your debt, and then you have allocated a certain sum of money for entertainment. Gambling in and of itself is not condemned by Scripture. It is not spoken against by Scripture, but greed is. And so gambling, we understand that it can easily become a snare, because part of the entertainment is the thrill of perhaps winning more. It's just something that I commit to your Christian consideration to think about and think through thoroughly. And some questions to ask there on page 90. If I gamble, am I, number one, denying God's providence by relying on chance or luck? Number 2, feeding my old self by coveting more money, opposite of God's call for contentment. Number 3, eroding the biblical work ethic, that if I hit it big, then I can retire early, and rather than following through with the responsibilities that God has given to me in the occupation that He has blessed me with. If I gamble, am I driven by the basic impulse of greed, which is the father of many other evils, the love of money? Am I supporting an industry that exploits those who are most desperate? Gonna pause there. And there are state sanctioned and state run gambling outlets, whether it's a casino or the lottery. And the ethical nature of that is for another discussion for another time. But by and large, the people who spend the most on the lottery are the people who can least afford to do so. And that is troubling, just as a citizen of this country. If I gamble, am I participating in an activity that provides no tangible economic value? Perhaps. Am I causing a slow leak with the money that could go into my savings and investing? That compound interest, that investing that money now will provide a far greater return than any gambling or lottery ever would. As you go through life, consider those questions when confronted with gambling, and you need to think this through ahead of time. And it might be entertainment, might be part of the budget, and you manage your household well in line with what God says about the pull of the new self, that we are the steward, the manager, rather than the pull of the old self, that I am the owner and I do what I want. And that may be the case. And pastorally, I also realize that there are times and places and cases where it started out that way, but it didn't end up that way. And I don't want that for you. So ask for the Lord's help in discerning what is the best for you in your life that brings glory to Him. So a little bit to consider there. If you want to talk about it more, feel free to contact me, Pastor Hagen, 419-262-8280, or pastorhagen@icloud.com. Finally, page 91. This is going to wrap us up for tonight. The pull of the old self, our reason, our human brain that is corrupted by sin, our human reason that is still at the same time, even though it's corrupted by sin, human reason is a gift of God, but it is the servant of the Word of God. It is not over the Word of God. Our human reason and our old self are attracted to treasures on earth. This is a strong pull that comes from within and that tears down life. The pull of the new self, God creates a new self in us that focuses on treasures in heaven. This strong pull is motivated by the gospel of Jesus and directs our decision making. The pull of the old self says, I'm an owner, I made it, it's mine, I do what I want. The pull of the new self says, this is a gift from God for me to manage a part of God's money for a period of time here on earth and to bring Him glory with the proper and godly stewardship management of it. Matthew 25, his master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. From Matthew 25. So a little bit of small group reflection time on your own or with whoever you are participating with on page 91. What new insights did you learn in this session that you wish to incorporate? Or what helpful experience can you share with others? Feel free to add something in the comments down below if you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook. And we can share with others. What helpful experience can you have to share? Talking about session 4, using God's money wisely. Encouragement and accountability. What successes can you report? What struggles are you having? And how can we help? Finally, our action plan from this section. The main action items. Can page back through the notes on this section and put some dates on it. Start date and end date. Can hit pause if you need to look back through your workbook and jot something down there. So, in conclusion, we are stewards and we use God's money wisely. Our focused perspective, my relationship with God, that God is the rightful owner. My identity, I am a manager of his resources. My heart, faithfulness and responsibility. My focus, it's not my money. In summary, page 92. It's my life. I can do with it what I want. We worked hard for what we have, and no one is going to tell us what to do with it. At least that's what our old self would have us believe. The truth is very different. God is the one who entrusted us with everything we have. He is the rightful owner, and we are merely managers or stewards of it. In Jesus' day, stewards were trusted workers who held the honored position of overseeing the assets of a wealthier person. They had the responsibility of taking care of the family, the home, and the business in a way that would match the owner's wishes and to maximize his investments. Even though they were in charge while the owner was away, they would have to give him an accounting of how faithful they were in carrying out that trust. Stewardship of life is more of a relationship than a concept. It recognizes God as the owner of all things, including our very lives. That means that all choices concerning our money, possessions, time, family relationships, and tasks are really spiritual decisions lived in response to our relationship with God. The more we get to know the real owner, the better we can manage life according to his will. That develops by listening to him speak in his word, the Bible. The word changes us from conforming to the ways of the world. It transforms us by changing the way we even look at life, compelling us to no longer live for ourselves, but for the one who died and rose for us. A faithful steward will learn to distinguish between needs and wants in order to faithfully live within the resources entrusted to us. Frequently ask yourself, is this what God, the real owner, would want me to do with these resources so that my life might fulfill his will? In the end, we long to hear him say, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." We pray. Dear Jesus, forgive me for getting carried away with my carelessness in the way that I've used or invested your resources. I so often forget that you are the owner. Take my poor decisions and make them turn out for my good. Help me trust that you will bless decisions made for you. Guide me so that my daily choices glorify you and show my thanks for all you have entrusted to me. Amen. That wraps up session 4 of Heart in Focus. Thanks so much for joining us. Remember that focus. F, fix your eyes on lasting treasure. O, overcoming worry. C, conquering the obstacles. And tonight, U, using God's money wisely. We've got, I think, 2 sessions left. Number 5 next time, shifting priorities, and then we'll conclude with number 6, which is a overall summary, keeping your focus. Thanks so much for joining us. God bless your day.